All right, so my app is up and running, but to be honest, it doesn't look all that great. And I need a way to kind of make this portfolio look nice. Again, this is kind of the end result that we're going for. And to do so, I already told you at the beginning of this, we're going to use Tailwind CSS. So if you haven't heard of Tailwind CSS, I would head over to the website, take a look at it. It's a utility-first CSS framework, utility meaning that we add on all of these classes that are provided to us out of the box, and that's how we create the styles and the look and feel for our website. So I am going to click in the Getting Started section. If you go under Framework Guides, there's a Nuxt one, and this is how you would do it if you wanted to do this process manually. You can go through and install Tailwind CSS. You can add Tailwind to your post CSS configuration, a whole bunch of steps that you need to go through to make this happen. This is one approach. Another approach in the Nuxt world is to use a module. So a module is kind of pre-baked solutions to what you're trying to accomplish here. So in this case, there is a Tailwind CSS module. So if we look at the Tailwind CSS module, all we need to do is go down and look at the quick setup. And if we add, if we go ahead and install the dependency and then add this little line to our Nuxt config, we are ready to go. So this takes out a lot of the configuration and trying to set this up manually. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring up my terminal here, and what it says there is to go ahead and say npm install. You can do --savedev or -d at nuxt.js/tailwind CSS, and that will install the dependency here. Once that's done, we're going to grab this modules and this right here, and we're going to go back over to our editor, open up Nuxt config, and we're going to add that section here. So this is the modules that we are declaring. We've already installed it. We're now declaring it, hey, we want to use Tailwind CSS as a module in the system. If you want to use another one, which we will, we'll use a bunch of them. You can just add a comma and add the next module that you're going to use. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and restart this npm run dev. I probably should have just typed it. That would have been quicker. But as we get started up here, now we can go into our app.view and we can say class equals bg blue 100, and we'll just say a padding of something ridiculous so that we can see this take effect. So now if we go back over to the browser, we see we have our blue padding or our blue background with a whole bunch of padding on the text. And so that is kind of the intro to Tailwind. We have got it installed. We're able to use it. Again, not a lot of configuration. The power of Nuxt modules gives us that functionality out of the box. So now if we look back at the portfolio, we have this like dark nav bar with these pills on it, and those are our navigation items. And so that's what I want to do now. This is also very responsive. So if we come in here and start to take this down, you can see that things change, and then the nav bar itself does indeed become responsive, and we're able to use it on a smaller form factor like a mobile device. So that's what we want to do. Now, to do that on a navigation bar, we could probably spend a really good chunk of change walking through how to build a responsive navigation bar in Tailwind. Instead of doing that, we are going to grab a pre-baked solution just to keep this tutorial a little bit more concise, all right? So I'm going to do this. Let's go ahead and bring this on screen. This is Tailwind UI. They have some really great built-in components. This does cost money if you want to get access to all of the components. They do have some free ones on their website out of the box, and this happens to be one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and use this navbar. I'm going to go over to the HTML and select View and look at the code. And so here's all the code that we're going to use. I'm going to go ahead and copy that and go back to my IDE, my text editor here. So we could copy this right into app.view, but we want to start to promote some good practices here. We want to go ahead and create a component. So I said there are conventions to doing things in Nuxt. One is our components go in a components folder. So we're going to create a components folder, and we need this as like our navigation or nav or header. You want to try to avoid names that are the same as semantic HTML elements, something like header, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this site header.view. And we're going to have our script set up here. And underneath that, I'm going to have I'm going to just paste that in because that already came with our script setup. I'm a big fan of kind of putting this stuff at the top if we can. So let's do that. And here we go. So what we're doing here is we're declaring an array of navigation items, dashboard, team, projects, and calendar. This is out of the box. And what it'll do is it will loop over those items, so item in navigation, and display those. Now, we don't need this portfolio dropdown that was over here, so I'm going to get rid of everything inside of menu. We're just not going to use it. And then actually everything inside of div we don't need either. And so I'm going to save that. Now, one little caveat here is you see we're importing some things, right? We're importing from headless UI view, and we're importing from hero icons. So these are going to be two dependencies that we need to make this happen. So I'm going to go back to my terminal. I'm going to say npm install at headless UI/view. And again, if these libraries are new to you, go ahead and check them out. They're from the creators of Tailwind, and they're really great. So, and then we'll npm install at hero icons/view. All right, so with that in place, we should have everything we need to display our navigation bar. So let's go back over to our application, and nothing showing up yet. And why is that? That is because in our app.view, we still just have this div displaying hello Nuxt 3. So what I want to do now is actually get rid of this. And I want inside of my main div, I want to go ahead and display that component. Now, normally in a Vue application, you'd have to go ahead and import site header, declare that, and then go ahead and use that component. One of the really nice features of Nuxt is that a lot of the standard things that we're going to use, like components and pages and a whole bunch of things out of the box, are going to be imported for us. So we don't need to import it. We can just say site header, and now that is going to be brought in for us. So if we go back to our application, we can now see that that is set up correctly. So now what we need to do is change those header items, right? We have this dashboard, team, projects, and calendar, and I want to kind of update that to reflect what we are building here. All right, so I'm going to set a variable up because we're going to use this in a second. Right now, I'm just going to say that this is index, and what I'm going to do is overwrite this navigation, and we're going to update this to include our updated navigation items. So we're going to have home, blog, projects, and uses. Here are the links for those. And then what we're using this current for is to try to determine if this is the current page that we're on. So let me go ahead and set name equal to index, and that will do this because we're going to actually use a variable that we can pull from Nuxt when we have routing set up. We don't have routing set up yet because we're not using any pages, but we'll come back to this in a second. So with this in place, we should be able to go back to our application, refresh, and now we have the correct items in place. Now, we're using this because we're saying, hey, if the name is equal to index on the home page, that's going to be the current page. We change it up a little on the blog page because the main blog page could list all of the blog articles, whereas we could have a single blog page that is like /blog/hello world, and that's like a single article. So instead of making it equal to index, we're just going to say, does that route name include blog? So this is a really good start. We have our navigation set up. Now we need a page. So I want to go back to the Nuxt documentation real quick. And if we go over to docs and we go over to getting started and we go on the left side here and go to views, this gives us a really good some insight into how to create views, how to create layouts in our Nuxt application. So Nuxt provides several component layers to implement user interfaces in your application. The first is app.view. We saw that. We created an H1 in there, it displayed on the page. The next one is components. We saw that. So most of the components are reusable pieces of our user interfaces, things like buttons and menus. What I like about this, again, you can create these components in the components directory and they will be automatically available across your application without having to explicitly import them. Again, a great time saver. Now, next up is pages. Pages represent views for each specific route pattern. So every file in the pages directory represents a different route displaying its content. So there is no pages directory yet, so we're not using view router. As soon as we create that pages directory with a page in it, now view router is enabled and we're using route. So how do we do that? Let's go back to our application. Let's create a new folder. We're going to call it pages. And on the pages, we're going to create a new index.view. That's kind of like the home route. And what we want to do here is set up our home page, if you will. So I'm going to say script setup. And then in my template, I will go ahead and just add a section with an H1 saying, hello, I'm Dan Vega, with a paragraph tag saying Spring Developer Advocate at VMware. So now that should be available under the / route. So if we go back here and we go to localhost 3000, this should be our home page, but nothing is displaying yet. Why is that? So if we go back to app.view, we see our site header here, but we need a way to say, hey, whatever page we are on, I want you to display that here, right? So how do we do that? Well, Nuxt, we use the Nuxt page component. So that will display whatever the current page is. So if we go back to this, refresh, and there is our content. Now this isn't aligning the same as the navigation bar, but we can go ahead and fix that. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to stick this in a main element and we'll put our Nuxt page up here. And what does the site header have? So the site header has, let's see, MX Auto, MX width of 7XL. And actually we're just going to copy this out right here. So we'll go back to our app.view and we'll say class. And this is just saying, hey, this is as wide as I want it to be. And then the margins on the x-axis, so on the left and right, go ahead and just fill those in. Whatever's left, go ahead and make those auto margins. So if we save that and go back, now this all kind of aligns up exactly how we want it to be. Okay, with that, I'm going to go back to the index and I want to create another section here. So let's create another section. And let's go ahead and let's copy in. I just want to copy in some text here. So I'm going to copy in this. So I have an H2 and then I have some text displaying just about me. So if we go back to this, that looks like that. Now what I want to do is I want to put an image over here. So how can we do that? So what I want to do is actually set up some flex here. I want to use flex to kind of display that. So in my section, I'm going to go ahead and add a class, and we're going to say flex call. And then what we want to do is we can make this responsive and say, hey, when we get to medium, so this is responsive by default. So we're saying, hey, at the smallest breakpoint, I want this to be a flex call. But mostly when it's any medium or higher, I want it to be a flex row because we have the real estate to go ahead and lay that out in a row. So at a flex row, now what I need to do is I'll create a div around this. And let's go ahead and paste this down here. Now what I can do is say, hey, for this div, I want you to go ahead and add a medium. I want you to go ahead and be a width of, say, 3/4. All right, because again, we have to figure out in a row how we're going to lay this out. So we have one more item that we want to display. And in this case, it's going to be an image. So I'm going to copy that image over. And right now I don't have that asset, so let's put that in there. So we are going to have an assets folder. So let's go ahead and create a new folder, assets, images, and that will do that. And then what I want to do is copy that image over. All right, so now I have my avatar. So you can put whatever image you have in that folder and you should be good to go. This little tilde is just saying, hey, from the root, go ahead and find the assets folder, images, and the Dan Vega avatar.ping. So we also have a width of 1/2, and then we did some responsive work here as well. So let's go ahead and save that and see if we can't get this to display. Great. Let's see how this looks as we start to shrink down. Again, when we get smaller, we should kind of move to a column layout. And now my story is on top of my image. Cool. I like that so far. So again, when you have some time, come back and fill in some info for yourself there. And with that, we want to go ahead and create one more section. So let's just say section. And inside of our section, I'm going to create a new heading 2, and we're just going to call this latest blog post. And then again, we'll come back to this when we get our blog post ready. So far, so good. We're almost there. We just need to create a footer. And again, so we're in app.view. We've included in app.view, we've included our site header. We probably want to do the same for footer, right? So we want to say site footer, and we're going to include that. And so we'll create a new component called site footer.view. All right, to do this, I'm actually going to bring in another module. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to modules. And there is one called Nuxt Icon. And this is really great. Icon module for Nuxt with 100,000 plus ready to use icons. Now, the reason I didn't use the Tailwind hero icons is because they don't have social media icons in that package. And so I really needed some social media icons for the footer. So this is what I'm going to install. So all we need to do is npm install Nuxt Icon. So I can do that. So I'm going to say npm install -d, and we'll say Nuxt Icon. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go back here. And again, just to try and keep this a little concise, I'm going to do some copy pasting here. I'm going to set up a script tag with our links. So I'm going to have a GitHub, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram social icon in the footer. And the icon is coming from Nuxt Icon. So if you go into the documentation, there's a way to search for icons. These are the icons that I found. Again, if you want to just copy this from the GitHub repo, go ahead and do so. Once I have that up, now I can kind of iterate over these links and create a nice looking footer. So let's do that. So I'm going to say template. I'm going to start with the footer element, and I'm going to give it a class of BG Gray 800. That's a similar color to the one that we saw before. So if we come back here and refresh, oh, we did not add it. Let's do that right now so we can see it. Oh, we did. Let's go ahead and restart. So I have my site footer. And in my site footer, I just have no content, so that's probably why it's not showing up yet. So let's go ahead and add some content. So I'm going to add a section. And the reason I'm going to do that here is because I'm going to add some styles here. Again, to kind of match the header, I want across the footer, I want the BG Gray 800, which matches the nav bar. But I only want a section that is the same as the navigation bar, like content-wise. So I'm going to do the same things here, like MX Auto, max width 7XL, PX2, small PX4, large PY6, let's say text gray 300. And then I'm going to do a flex layout, and it's flex row by default, but let's just add that. So with that in place, now I can have on the left side, I want to just display some text. So I'm going to display that text like this. So that is, I'm also setting a flex 1 to say, hey, grow as much as you can there. And then what we want to do is we want to say, let's have a div. And this is also going to be a flex layout. So we're going to say flex row. I want to justify center. I'm going to put a little gap on here. And I'm going to put a margin border on the bottom and a margin border on the top. Okay, so with that, that's our layout. Now we can iterate over these links. I can say a v4, so v4. So for every link in links, we need a key. So I'm just going to give it a key of link.name. The link is going to be link.href. And that's it. So that's our link. Then inside of there, we're using Nuxt icon. And we're saying, hey, the name of the icon is link.icon, which is right. I want to change this, though. I want to set the size. Oops. Size is equal to 1.5 rem. And I'm going to set a class of text gray 300. So again, this is me just kind of playing around with the styles. I've already done this, so I know what these styles are going to kind of look like. Whoops, why did that break? So for you, you can just kind of play around with what you want this to look like. Let's see if that turned out okay, and it did. So I like that. So far, so good. Now we have one little awkward thing going on here, which is this content is pushing as far as it can go, and then we have the nav bar right after it. What I'd rather have is the nav bar at the very bottom of this page, no matter the size of the content. Like if I only had this info, I'd still want this down at the bottom. So how can we do that? All right, so if we go back over to app.view, we have this div here. We have this site header, our main section, and our footer. The way that we can accomplish this is on this div, I'm going to set a class, and I'm going to say that this is going to be a flex layout. It's going to be a flex call. So we're laying this out in a column. And I want to set the minimum height of this to the screen. So this div is as high as the screen is. And then what happens at this main class, what we're going to say is width full. And let's see if that gives us what we're looking for. So we need one more thing here, I think, which is, hey, I want this to grow. And let's go ahead and put the items at the start. So let's try that. And there we go. That is exactly what I was looking for, the desired effect. So no matter, no matter how high this is, that is always going to be at the bottom. One thing I noticed here is we are not displaying our icons. So let's figure out what's going on there. If we go to footer and we say link in links, so okay, and I think we forgot one thing here. So remember, when we install a module, we need to declare it. So Nuxt icon is something we did not declare yet. So let's go to our Nuxt config, and we'll just say Nuxt icon. And with that, we should be able to go back here and use it. And let's refresh, and there are social media icons. So great, that is the start to our layout. We did a whole lot here. We created a new project using Nuxt. We installed the Tailwind CSS module, and we created that navigation, that home page, that footer. Now we could start to build on this and create the other pages in our project, like our blog, our project page, and our use page. So let's go ahead and continue on with that.